What's going on, guys? Kaiger here, and I'm trying something new here where I talk to some high level PvP players about what they think about Brawl, Challenge Arena, and Brawl Arena. Today, I'm joined by Heartbreaker, who is a high level Cleef main that focuses on a very defensive strategy in Brawl. This is how that conversation went. All right, man. So we're talking about PvP, and starting off with Battlefield. How do you feel about the current Battlefield? Obviously, we have the new ones coming soon, but how do you feel about Moon Shadow Forest?
I would say it's not necessarily uh for the newer players, because they're not too caught up on the meta. Um, Therefore, like the Tessarion meta or the light heart magician, going around and sleeping everybody. Um, there's different things that people tend to do to get an edge on any game mode. But I would say Battlefield is one of those where it's real easy to murder the Leafs, we call it.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the new players tend to, I would say they jump in and then they stay away from it once they get mobbed on. So you don't really catch too many Leafs enjoying themselves in there. So I don't think a rework would fix the game mode. Um, I would say players trying to counter it, especially new ones, are going to have a difficult time with what is already in the game at the experienced player's disposal.
Well, up at the
Um,
higher end, what do you think are the? You already named a couple, Tessarian, Celia. Uh, what other units do you think are just you see all the time and get used a lot in Battlefield?
any monster that could stun and AOE stun or AOE oblivion or AOE silence. Because the problem is when you get the AOE and then you get players rounding up to collect sky stones.
Mm-hmm.
One button and you could pretty much freeze up whoever's in the area. So if you have like a Garu or I believe it's the light Polar Queen,
Yeah,
like
Eleonora.
monsters like that could make a serious impact whenever their skills are fully charged and ready to go, because the players are left to do absolutely nothing. And if you try to run away, depending on which summoner that opposing player has, sometimes they could just snipe you down when you're trying to run away. Or
Now what?
say if you get hit with, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Now what about monsters that you don't see, but you think will really shake it up if people brought it?
Mm, I would say mm, monsters that have some AoE freeze, maybe AoE slow. I don't really see freeze or slow too much in Battlefield. Um, Garu, which is like a supreme unit right now, I haven't really seen him too much in Battlefield, which is kind of a surprise because he has like that AoE fear,
The fears.
which just leaves users just running.
All right. Are there any changes you would like to see specifically in this version of Battlefield?
See, that's a hard one to answer because of the type of game mode it is. I feel like switching things up may make things worse or may make things better. It's just how the game is currently at the moment. I would say damage reduction, maybe. That's the only thing I could really think of because people could get sniped in less than 2 seconds. That's kind of like the meta right now. It's just everybody losing battles within 2-3 seconds,
Well, when I talked,
just by getting spammed.
yeah, I got you. When I talked to Dax yesterday, something he mentioned, we got the big Korean update, whatever thing, And then we have the big update that happened today, where we know that in I think it's June, that this battlefield is going to 5-on-5. Uh, the new battlefield is obviously already 5-on-5, but this one will also become 5-to-5 later on down the line. Something I talked with Dax about was normally we have the two time frames that you can go in by yourself, and then the other two time frames you can go in with a group. What do you think about a normal group is max 3 people? What do you think about it being 3 people or a separate battlefield that is 3-on-3?
Um, Reducing the numbers could work, but then that means they'll have to downsize the map realistically, um, which at the end of the day could kind of equal the same result in that aspect. Um, if you have a smaller map, less space to travel, you can still get spammed. I would say that's one of the things that's just difficult about where the game is at now, because you can't really put a damage cap on Battlefield because you can still get CC'd to death.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I guess, new monsters need to probably come into play to prevent that stuff.
With like movement
That's
speed,
pretty much like the
immunity,
best
things
bet.
like that.
Yes, but maybe non-strippable for like a short amount of time.
They've already shown
That'll be the
us
best
that
bet.
that's something they're willing to do recently. Let's see.
Yeah.
Moving on to Challenge Arena. It's one that people don't really talk about much at all. Mostly it's just, really, people don't even really talk about Battlefield. It's mostly just Brawl. But I wanted to touch a little bit on Challenge Arena. When we look at the higher tier defenses, it's mostly Galleon, Tessarion, X, right?
Yes.
Uh, what are your thoughts on that? Does Galleon or Tessarion need something happen to them, or do you think it's fine as it is?
I would say from a Sky Arena veteran, I would say it wouldn't be right to rework their skills, because that's why we tend to love them in the previous game that they were in. But from the logic and the viewpoint on where this game stands, I would say if you would not like to change their skills, at least supply monsters that could not necessarily easy counter it, but make it a lot easier for the opposing attacker to deal with that combo. Because we all know in Chronicles, once your summoner is dead, your team is pretty much not going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why people tend to use comps like that, because it's a summoner buster. It could destroy your summoner within 2-3 seconds if you're not necessarily paying attention.
The Oblivion?
So, yeah, the Oblivion is probably like the most overpowered thing right now, because you could just nuke somebody passives. Like, we have a million passes, but none of it matters if you're Oblivion.
Of course, a big one people talk about the can't die, or the shield from Orbia that can't die from Cleave, but both of them also have a secondary passive that doesn't really get talked about, and that's Cleave has a 10% chance to get a mana back if he gets hit, and um, Orbia has a 10% chance to get a mana back if she has elemental advantage, which is a passive, right?
Yep.
Oblivion just says
Yep.
no. As you said, Garu is a huge deal right now, which Oblivion soft counters. Because his whole thing is as he gets low HP, he takes less damage. That's a passive. If he's in his awakened state, in his passive it says, if Oblivion, take it off. So Oblivion definitely in a very interesting spot right now.
Uh,
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
have you have you had a chance to try out the trial function in the challenge arena?
I have played around with it a little bit. It's just, I would say when it comes to that, I would prefer to use my time, in better areas in the game. Um, I'm very busy for the most part, so I would love to experiment, but I would use my time more to get dailies done and stuff like that in raids because there's a lot of stuff that you have to do on a daily basis to try to keep up and
I
not
gotcha.
wail 24/7 to stay ahead.
To anyone listening, trial, if you challenge someone above you in rank and also has to be above you in power. I'm trying to get a gauge of the numbers and percentages, but it's like they have to be over 20 or 30 points more than you and about 20-ish% more power than you. You can use up to 5 tickets to do 5 attacks effectively. You do one attack, but it counts as if you won 5 times. Uh, it's very interesting. I like the idea of getting rewarded if you challenge someone higher than you. But the fact that you have to be weaker in the battle is something that should probably be looked at, in my opinion. Uh, Now, we talked about the biggest defenses being Galleon, Tessarion, and something else. When you see that, what do you bring in with you?
Sometimes you would have to counter cleave, um, depending on how strong your units are or how strong your summoner are. That tends to work for me. I would say 70 or 80% of the time when I'm trying to climb. Or you could just do or try your best to do full condom method and just bring in a whole bunch of supports and hope that you survive all their S2s and S3s that they unleash. Um, it also depends on which staff Orbia would have or which weapon Cleef would have. Kina, I feel bad. She's not really one of those that would, add that extra damage to the fight. She's still a little deadly when it comes to making sure that your Cleave monsters do stay alive. Um, but you don't necessarily have to worry about getting nuked by Akina. So I would say is depending on which staff that summoner has set up on their defense makes a big difference as well.
I
Because you're
gotcha.
always going to face the same defense most of the time. It's going to be the Galleon, Ethna, and Tessarion.
Something to note for the people listening, uh, it updates itself every about 10 minutes. So, a good time to attack someone if you want a cheesy win is if you know their guild's doing their guild raid, or if they're doing something else in the game. You can attack a guy when they have the wrong staff equipped. Different monsters throw their runes on. You can find a good time to get a cheesy win in. Uh, how do you feel about the payout for Challenge Arena?
Um, that's an interesting one. I would say the fact that they give out LDs, LD scrolls for Challenge Arena and Brawl, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's kind of counterproductive. I mean, I agree with it because I don't finish, insanely bad. Like I always finish probably top 5% or so. But it's it's kind of unfair for any new gamer because you're just feeding the players who have good units and high power levels more fire to just keep doing more damage. That's why when you get up to the higher levels of Brawl and Challenge Arena, you tend to start seeing more LDs because it's always the same people that are finishing in the
Yeah, it's
top
feeding itself.
10 or top 20. Yeah.
and they're the only ones getting the LD scrolls. Do you think it should be more like the Battlefield payout, where the top X people are still getting more, but the amount they're getting more is almost nothing? Or do you think that would kill the competitiveness?
Um, that's the thing. It's a double-edged sword. It definitely will kill the competitiveness, but I was talking to a guild member about it. I don't know, about say a little less than a week ago, and I would say people tend to play games like this, especially Summer's Chronicle in general. Is you spend so much time farming, you spend so much time gathering stuff, and putting so much time in. And at the end of the day, like pretty much, what are you doing it for? And the question, I mean, the answer is to compete with others. So if anybody can have an edge over somebody else, they would take it. So I feel like it wouldn't bring out that. It wouldn't take away the competitiveness simply for the fact is if you're spending all the time in the game to grind it out and stuff like that, you're still gonna end up doing PvP and stuff like that. So I would
Mm-hmm.
say like if they did like special costumes or something like that, I know it's probably to come in the future, but I wouldn't necessarily say LD scrolls would be like the limit of rewards you should receive.
I gotcha. Moving on into Brawl, what do you think are the go-to units right now in Brawl?
Oh, jeez, I was waiting for this question.
Let's
Um,
ignore
it,
LDs for the conversation.
oh yeah, that's fine. Um, I would say the go-to units are multi-purpose units. Units they use for multiple different kind of picks. I play well over 100 brawl matches a week, and I have a lot of experience with it. So I would say that um, any unit, there's no point of saying any unit, but I would say the units that are go-to for everyone, which you tend to see a lot, is Galleon, Ariel, Garu. The meta right now is heavy water. I know they're coming with the update and they're buffing wind. Um, we'll see how that plays out.
We just got a small update for that. Two changes if you want to take this into account is if you have the negative elemental advantage, you get minus 10% accuracy. The other is we went from 30% damage down in while in arena to 40% damage down while in arena. But when you go into time, when healing goes down, now it's heal goes down and damage goes up. If that
Yep,
changes
just
anything
like in
for you.
Sky Arena. We'll have to see how that works. And I only say that is the units that are most picked right now are just they're extremely OP. So we're just gonna have to see how those changes play out and see if it's good enough or not. I agree with the changes. I always like meta changes because it keeps the player base, interested. Not to mention too, it forces the players who like to spam that stuff to change up their play style.
Yeah,
So it
the
adds a
only
little more
thing
complexity to the game.
the only thing I'm worried about with that change is like Juno is like the only one that immediately comes to mind because she's not like first pick right now, but she still gets used. And as you said, it's heavy water, so now she has minus accuracy on the strip. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But
Yeah.
you were telling us a couple. Is that the three that you said, or do you have more that you would like to add? And the ones you see a bunch.
Juno was going to be next. Tiana is definitely a big one as well. It's the way the meta is right now. It's the top players are either cleaving or they're using a Kana method, which we call it, is where they're just going full support. Um, it's kind of hard to find like that in between. Some matches you might catch that, but you could kind of tell by a person's first pick on what their approach is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it all depends.
Now, what do you think are some undervalued or underrepresented units? Ones that you don't see, but when you do, really make a difference. The first one that comes to mind for myself is something like Charlotte, the green occult girl that increases mana costs of your opponent.
Um, I use Charlotte to try to counter the Galleon method, and it worked. Sometimes it was too RNG, but it was a good idea. I feel like if it was a little less RNG, it would be a lot more helpful because Galleon's not necessarily on the RNG side. He tends to be spot on in the middle. It's like everybody's favorite pick.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some undervalued units. I don't really know. Once you get up there, it's kind of hard to try to be different. I would say Darian's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
It forces the opposite player to go immunity because it's 24/7 provoke.
You almost never see
So
him, but when you
usually,
do, he makes a difference.
yeah, exactly. You never really almost see him, but it's also pretty lethal too. That's why a lot of Orbeas tend to use Darian because you can't focus on the squishy Orbea. So they do their damage from there.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when they go Darian, they'll probably go like Juno Darian, Tiana like Shushu or something. Like they'll tend to just keep him alive, and then they'll try their best to just nuke with Orbea.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different kind of approach. Um, but that's the thing is there's not many two units that are extremely good that could counter what's going on right now.
Now, we had the changes I just told you about. We also recently had the went from the pick 4 ban 1 to the pick 5 ban 2. Are there any additional changes, maybe from Sky Arena or whatnot, that you would like to see implemented in Brawl?
Um, Jeez. I at first I didn't like the change when it came to adding an extra monster to pick. Simply for the fact is at the time there wasn't that many monsters that were pretty good. Not to mention too, there's not that many extremely good healers as well. So you would catch a time where somebody would just hog all the healers, and then you're kind of like stuck there, like okay. Um, so I think it was a little too early for them to implement that pick 5. But other than that, when it comes to changes, once again, it's just the nature of how the game is just currently at right now, and how you're able to play the game. Um, you can't really alter it too much. Um, Otherwise, you're just be changing the game completely. So that one is, I would say, from a heavy player standpoint, it's kind of hard to answer that one. Um, yeah, that one's a little tough to answer.
Well, how do you feel, kind of guiding it a little bit? How do you feel about the buffs and nerfs when they happen? Because something that Dax mentioned was, when Juno thing happened, obviously it wasn't that big of a nerf, but let's say for argument's sake, it was a big nerf. People spent a lot of scrolls on her. They got her up to A15. They put a lot of stuff in her. Sure, they gave them a reset, but now they have, 180 shards or whatever of her sitting around. As a spender that would, if a monster comes around like that, uh, where do you stand on this?
Um, I'm kind of more, I hate to say this, but on the dev side. Um, Usually, if a person, but before the monster even gets nerfed, it's like a small time span that tends to pass by. I would say
Mm-hmm.
so. Like Juno didn't get nerfed, I think at least for like a month or so. So if you're able to 15 awaken like Juno in a month, like you must be spending, some sort of money or a lot
Mm-hmm.
of scrolls on it in that certain amount of time. So then you're kind of running to that, oh, I need to get a supreme monster so I could beat everybody. So it's kind of like you're not spreading out your resources or real money out to, different monsters and stuff. You're kind of just hopping on all the best monsters. So I would say, in fairness to everyone, buffs and nerfs need to happen. I guess it would be up to you to not jump on like a bandwagon and assume that a monster that is going to be extremely well going to stay that way. Prime example is Garu. Like, everybody wants to grab Garu, but he's most likely going to get nerfed because his skill sets and his counter method. Like, even if you try to counter him, he's just going to do more damage towards you. Like, it's
Hmm.
not going to last a very long time.
And at least
So
using that Juno as an example, I mean, she's still used. She's not like number one pick, but I've seen people like when they get the go second, get the double pick, they still pick her up. So I mean,
exactly.
she's not dead. As long as the nerfs and buffs are happening like that, I'd be pretty happy. There was a minor line change in the update today that you know how there was that big nerf to revive. They're constantly balancing things. They added an extra 10% to revive health.
I feel like, speaking on that, actually, the revive little meta that we had, I feel like it got nerfed way too much. Because now you rarely don't even see those units. The only time I really see revives is when Kina picks, I think it was Dark Staff or Fire Staff. It's one of
Dark.
those. You don't really see, yeah, Dark. You don't really see revives too often. So anybody who had any revive monster, like, um, they were completely
Vanessa's.
like
Yeah,
in shock on that one.
I gotcha. But I like
I would
I
say
like.
because Oblivion is way worse than Revive. The
Hmm.
Oblivion meta is way worse than Revive meta.
But it's nice to see that they are. I From this change that I just told you, they added 10% back to it. It seems like they noticed that they went a little bit too far. And talking with several Sky Arena players, they said that something that Com2S is actually pretty good at is keeping their finger on the pulse of PvP, right?
Yes, because that is ultimately, just like how I mentioned before, that's ultimately why everyone, continues to, be late game in games like this, is because you spend so much time grinding. And then for the whales, you spend so much money on gear and stuff. And at the end of the day, you just want to compete with others. That's where all the real fun really comes in.
Now, to square this all off on the Brawl talk, I'm going to go through all three summoners. You're going in blind, you don't recognize the name, they're Grandmaster top three on their server. What staff do you ban? We'll start with Orbia.
Orbia, I would say light staff. I'd ban that 24/7.
Because of the crit rate and strip?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you're going up against a Cleef. You don't know their name, but you know they're top three on their server. What do you ban?
I'm going to ban light staff as well because it's a very annoying meta to deal with, especially if they're top three. They most likely have a Ilona, so they're going to have immunity probably 24/7. That's how they
Yeah,
got up there that high. Not to mention the blind
damage
is
taken
very
up.
annoying to deal
Yeah,
with.
and the yeah
Yep.
blind. Kina.
That's a funny one. I just ban random ones. I just ban random ones. I don't really think none of them are too lethal. I don't mind her revive. Wind staff gets annoying sometimes, but most
Yeah,
players don't
immunity strip.
necessarily know how to
Yeah.
use their wind staff. Yep.
All right. So keeping that in mind, are there any changes you would like to see going in the same order to Orbia for Brawl?
Um, I would say they're kind of wishy-washy with her ability to do things. And what I say is, she can put out an insane amount of splash damage. And the biggest thing about her is she doesn't have to be in your face to do it. So she has like somewhat a better kit than most than Cleef and than Kina. Just because of the aspect that she doesn't necessarily have to travel as close to monsters to do an insane amount of damage. She's a lot more versatile as well too.
Yeah, her whole thing is
People say
debuffs.
that she's harder to use, but I don't necessarily see that.
It's pretty clear that her whole thing is she throws out debuffs, does damage, like you said. Do you think you're saying they need to solidify like what her role is more, or?
I would say that yes, because she does also have like a slightly less better passive than Cleef. She still has a lot of protection on her end, especially when she's about to die as well too. So it's kind of like if you want to be like this ranged nuker, then the passive kind of like counteracts it. Like I understand how Cleef has the endure, but that's because like for him to actually do some damage, he has to be like up on your face to do it. So I can see him being like frontline more. She doesn't necessarily have to be frontline, so she has like a lot of protection buffs on her. So it's kind of like I feel like it's just easier to use her. There's not like what's the word? There's kind of no downside. She's squishy, but she could survive long enough to put out that damage and survive long enough to kill at least two of your monsters. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? So it's kind of
Now,
like
in the same order, Cleef. I know you're a Cleef user. Uh, what changes would you like to see for Cleef and Brawl?
um I would say maybe a couple more debuffs added to certain weapons. And I only say that because Cleef will probably put out what three debuffs on the recent update with his water staff, which is pretty annoying to deal with. Yes, I agree with that, but that's the only staff that does that. And it's not necessarily on the edge too, because I know Orbia with her wind staff, she has the defense down. Her dark staff applies literally like 9 debuffs in 2 seconds, AOE on top of that. So it's kind of like you know what I'm saying. Like it's kind of like okay, well,
Well, what
I mean
weapon
maybe a
then?
couple of debuffs here and there.
What weapon then? Because fire has destroy, stun, silence. What weapon? Dark maybe needs a upgrade.
Dark is a tricky one to use. His skills are slow with Dark.
Because they nerfed
I
it a
don't
while
know.
ago
Maybe they could
where
just
all the abilities had endure and crit damage dealt down. Now they kind of got rid of all that.
yeah. I don't know. Not necessarily like game breaking debuffs. Just ones to work with monsters who aren't really used. You know what I'm saying? Like it would probably help a lot of like if he did like poison or something on one of his weapons because like LDs that people pull like Dark Beetle, he's not really used at all, and it'll give like a incentive for those who necessarily don't want to use those kind of monsters because there's no benefit in PvP.
Now on the same thing, just trying to finish this train of thought. Instead of debuffs, because we know he's supposed to be a guardian class. What about buffs instead?
Um,
Because
it would be cool.
his fire
Um,
third skill gives himself attack up, right?
um, it would be cool. The only thing with that is the counters. It's I feel like it would be harder to let me get my train of thought here. I think it would be harder to deal with debuffs than buffs because like I mentioned before, Once your summoner's dead, it's not. You're most likely going to lose the battle. So it would encourage people to bring in a lot more strippers. And then you're also limited to what you could ban as well too. So depending on what summoner you're gonna be going up against, you're also gonna have to adjust accordingly with your monsters and your approach as well too.
Gotcha. The main cleansers we have are things like Juno and Ariel. Uh,
Exactly.
Now, same thing for Kina. What kind of changes do you think she needs?
Oh man, I
Uh,
have no idea.
they did just
I
give
have
her
no
one
idea.
kind of major change where before, if she went under 30% HP, she would give herself and everyone around her continuous recovery. Now she does a burst heal when that happens, as well as damage taken down when that triggers.
I like the burst heal to give her something that will allow her to extend the battles, but not in an OP manner. Because the burst heal is nice, but say if you were to face a like condom cleave or an Orbia with a lot of not end game, late game supports such as like Wusa or Bastet with the bubbles, um, they kind of can't do anything with the heal because you're capped out at a heal, and then once the game continues on, your heal does less healing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like that's why a lot of Kinas that you face now they kind of just do the YOLO, like they just try to nuke you as fast as they can because they're not necessarily built for um like later games, and they're not built for damage either. So if they try to do the later game support like build, no one's going to be doing damage on their team. So it's kind of like they're stuck to like almost one way of playing,
I got
kind of
you.
in a way.
I do like that they kind of put her kind of in a balance with the other two, with the whole Cleave gets his Endure and healing received up. Uh, Orbia gets her shield and mana regen up. And then Kina now, she didn't have anything when she got low besides continuous recovery, which that takes time. Now it's a more oh shit thing, just like everyone else, where you get that burst heal and damage taken down so you can get yourself in a better position. Uh,
Yep.
Anything else you would like to say on any of these three game modes before we get out of here?
Um, they're interesting in their own way. Um, they all need serious work. It's difficult. We could throw suggestions all day, but just how the game is, and how it was created, it's a little difficult to get that balancing out there in a timely manner. I think this is something that the developers are just going to have to tweak slightly over and over and over again to get it to where it's like, okay, like I think the new user would enjoy this. I think the more experienced and late game users would enjoy this. And then
Mm-hmm.
just finding that balance method, because right now, anybody can agree it's very imbalanced right now.
Well, I guess the last question, and then we'll be out of here. Is I know it's Summoner's War Chronicles, but do you think the Summoner is too valuable?
Yes, yes, I believe so. And you could tell by the meta, you could tell by who's in first place, and then you could also tell by who's in 100th place in Brawl every single week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're not protecting your summoner, and if your summoner is not doing what it's supposed to do, like your team is going to collapse. So you could have the best runes on your monsters, you could have the most LD Nat 5s, but if your summoner is going out the battle, you're 95% chance going to lose that battle.
Yeah, I've seen Akina 1v3 three monsters after the initial clash. Uh,
Yep.
but that's it, man. Thank you very much for hopping on.
Definitely, I appreciate you.